Well, happy Thanksgiving, everybody. The one thing that I have noticed among people is that the capacity for being grateful is really a mark of refinement. Not expressing gratitude, but feeling gratitude. Many people express it. But the way to really feel it and express it truly, as opposed to merely expressing words, is to take it within. The expression of gratitude is really a sort of a feeling of appreciation that in itself is tantamount to trying to attune yourself to the giver. To express gratitude to God is to go into silence, to be open to His vibrations. It's sort of like when somebody does something for you that you really appreciate. You don't have to say it, but you feel love going out to that person that creates a link and sort of closes a circuit in a way. An interesting thing, when I met Ananda Mohima, it was a wonderful meeting. I felt enormously inspired. I could hardly speak for joy. And it was very sweet. I had certain messages from different people. One of the monks had asked for a little bit of cloth, maybe a handkerchief or something that she had used. And so I asked her if she could give this, and she gave it so gladly I thought, wow, I'd better get in this act too. I said, could I have two, please? And she brought me a towel that she'd used, and then she brought me this big shawl that I have, not wearing today, it's white, but something she said she'd worn for 5 years, and gave this to me. And I was just so moved by it, and afterwards I said thank you. And her answer always intrigued me. She said, well, would you thank your own mother? In this country, of course, we would. But in India, generally speaking, they don't express thanks except formally. They don't express thanks to their nearest and dearest because it seems too formal. Partly it's the word itself, dhanyavad. It sounds very formal in itself. But many Indians, even when talking their own language, will prefer to say thank you, because it has a more informal feel to it. But the thing is that the consciousness there is that the way to thank, if you really are thanking, is to simply offer your love and offer it in silence. And this is what I have noticed with people of any kind of sensitivity. Whether they say thank you or not is superficial, but to be able to feel and express appreciation, the ability to give credit to another human being, is something that you find a great many people don't have. They almost, when you do them a favor, they almost act as if you owed them that favor. They almost act as if they didn't want to open themselves to the extent of actually saying that they appreciate it, for fear that maybe you'd twist it in some way or they'd get hurt. It's really sad. I've noticed this especially in the cities, and of all cities in the world, especially in New York, where you walk down the streets, or preferably drive through the streets, and you see this constant hedging in of the consciousness for fear of being struck by somebody, by not just a literal sword blade, but by an unkind remark, by an unappreciative attitude, and so on. And I've even seen people in that sort of crowd where if you do smile at them, they sort of look at you suspiciously, as if you were trying to put something over on them, as if now comes the pitch attitude. But when people really are able to say, it doesn't matter how I'm taken by other people, but I just enjoy feeling and expressing appreciation, I enjoy feeling and expressing love, whether they hurt me, whether they cut me, whether they didn't really mean it, it doesn't matter. To be able to give more than the other person, to be able to open yourself more and never to be afraid of what might come as a result of it. This is the mark that I'm talking of a refined person, a sensitive person, and one who has developed enough inner strength not to need to protect himself anymore. What you have to give is your own to give, and how it's taken doesn't matter, because you're not giving it with the thought of what you're going to get in return. Most people give with that thought, and most people give appreciation with that thought. if people can really open their hearts and their minds, their souls, in a spirit of appreciation, it doesn't mean thank you, God, for all your gifts. It means, God, I love you, and it's so wonderful through your gifts to see how you love me. This kind of mutual sharing, which people can enjoy with one another, but which is most beautiful of all when it's expressed with God, toward God. This is the spirit of thanksgiving and the whole purpose behind this beautiful festival. It originated, as Keshava was reading to me today in the encyclopedia, as a harvest festival. Gratitude to God for the harvest that the first Pilgrim Fathers got when they came into this country. And the story, whether it's true or not, the legend is that on that first Thanksgiving Day, the American Indians came to this feast and brought their own harvest, their own produce, and they all sat down and ate together. But there is another thing, that if we give real appreciation to God and really recognize that all gifts come from Him, then we recognize that the source of those gifts is infinite, and we have nothing to be afraid of anymore. We can walk as those two who were, in the beginning they were friendly, the whites and the Indians, but nonetheless there were still some sort of border skirmishes. But at that time and at that meal, you saw symbolized the idea that all good things come from God, so what have we to fear from our fellow man? And if in our emphasis on world brotherhood and trying to bring people together into a consciousness of being one family, if we can emphasize above all that God is our common Father, Mother, Friend, Beloved, and that all things that can come to us come from His hand, whether good, they're all good. Not one of them is bad if we understand it in the right way, because even the things that are painful come for some kind of very important lesson or purification. But if we can take it as coming always from Him, then we can feel gratitude at all times. And devotees who have this consciousness of real gratitude to Him for what He gives, what He does for them, find that even those things which seem unfortunate actually do prove to be great gifts. But it has to be with that understanding, or He holds back. He withholds His complete gift. And I think perhaps the loveliest story I've ever heard on that particular subject was from the hiding place, where Corey and Betsy were taken into a concentration camp, and the room, the dormitory in which they were, was just absolutely ridden with fleas. And Betsy was saying that we have to be grateful to God for everything. And here they were in a concentration camp, hardly getting enough food to stay alive, being driven by cruel guards. And Betsy tried to say this, and Corey, there was one thing Corey could not accept, and that was those fleas. Those could not be from God. Okay, maybe I'm getting lessons and good things from all these others, but I can't take these fleas. But Betsy was absolutely convinced that for all these things we have to thank God, even for the fleas, and she wouldn't back down. And the beautiful thing came, as those of you who have read the story will recall, that one day they were holding a prayer meeting in that dormitory when the guards in the camp came by and were about to go into the dormitory, and they would have caught them there and subjected them to very severe punishment, even death. And just as they were about to go in, the woman guard there said, "Oh, let's not go in there, it's full of fleas." So they didn't go in. So the fleas were a minor inconvenience compared to the torture they'd have been submitted to had they not had those fleas. So this is something that I have seen in my life, in the lives of other people, again and again and again, that if a person will take with an even mind whatever God gives him, because if we thank Him for this beautiful dinner, then we should also thank Him for the times when we don't have the opportunity to eat at all. The proper kind of gratitude that we give to the infinite is not for blessings given, but for His love, which sometimes is given in very sort of difficult to take ways, no doubt. But if we can thank Him for everything, then and then only do we grow. I have seen many people, it's become almost sort of a cliche in my mind, saying, "Oh, Master gave me a wonderful apartment." And I think, gosh, you don't really yet understand what it is Master has to give you if you can get all that excited about getting an apartment. It may be that he gave it to you, and it may be just your karma, but the point is that they tend to think in terms, A, of the physical, material blessings that God and Guru give, and B, they tend to think in terms of the comforts involved with those little blessings rather than the lessons involved. Very often the people to whom Master was closest were the ones whom he disciplined the most. The ones that he, like this one monk, Brother Bhaktananda, whom Master was disciplining very severely for some time. And one of the nuns got very sort of hurt for Bhaktananda, Reverend Michael he was then, and she was very sad for Michael that he was being treated so harshly by Master. She thought Master was being unfair. And Master said to her, there is a saying, he said it to Bhaktananda, began to feel a bit sort of affected by this sympathy, as people will. And after all, he was being bludgeoned on the one hand by his guru and sympathized with by this fellow disciple. And so Master, to catch this thought before it grew, it wasn't a strong thought, but it was just sort of nascent, said to him, there is a saying in India, she who loves you more than your own mother is a witch. He said, I'm your mother, wouldn't I know what is good for you? And the thing is that the Guru and God, very often those who really love God the most are the ones who get beaten the hardest, because the purpose of the Guru, when he finds a little child in a mud puddle, is not to pretty up the mud puddle, not to make beautiful marks on the forehead with the mud. It's to take the child out of the mud puddle and clean it up. We are in this mud puddle of delusion, and the purpose of the Guru is not to make the mud puddle more comfortable. The purpose of him is to take us out of this delusion, and if in doing so he has to make it a little bit inconvenient and uncomfortable, it doesn't matter. He couldn't care less, because he knows that what he's giving us is for our own good. It doesn't mean that he's happy to subject us to the tests. It's that he knows that what we've come to him for may require those tests. It's like a doctor who submits you to an operation to save your life. A child, not understanding that that's the purpose of the doctor's operation or purpose of his drilling on the tooth or whatever it is, may scream bloody murder. But that doesn't mean that the doctor would be more loving by not going ahead with it. When I was a child in Romania, I had, as you all know, colitis and came close to dying of it. And I couldn't have milk or other dairy products for quite a long time. And as a result of the lack of calcium, my teeth began to go very bad. I have just all sorts of fillings in them. And the dentist, because I was screaming, they didn't have Novocaine in those days, and here a little kid of 11 years old being drilled deep in his teeth, right up to the nerves. You can imagine what a lot of screaming I did. Most of my teeth needed it. And the dentist, out of compassion, finally ended up not drilling the entire tooth, but filling it in over a little bit of remaining decay. Now, was that compassion? It meant I had to go through the whole thing all over again 3 years later, and much deeper. So it is with the Gurus. They would rather give us a little bit of pain now to spare us a great deal of pain later on. So when we say, thank you, God, let's thank Him for our blessings, yes, but let's not just define the blessings in terms of nice apartments and good things. Let us define the blessings primarily in terms of the opportunities that God has given us to grow. Some people come to Ananda and they talk about the difficulty of living here. Well, it isn't easy. It's not fun slogging through deep mud looking for an outhouse in the dark. There are all kinds of inconveniences. We well know them. The fact is, however, that it is an almost unparalleled opportunity for serving God, an almost unparalleled opportunity for giving your life to Him and working for Him. And to me, that is the only thing that matters. I mean, look at it this way, if you like. The Catholic mystics used to go out of their way to make life uncomfortable. We don't have to. They would flagellate themselves and lie on boards and go on long fasts and so on. We don't have to do any of that stuff. The discipline that comes from living as we do is great. It's wonderful. And actually, now that we're on the eve of doing what we have to do, because the world goes on and we go on, and we have to build this community. But I think I can say it as a prophecy, virtually, that the day will come when we'll look back on these days as the good old days. These are the most wonderful days, when we haven't a huge community, when things really are still simple and primitive, and we'll keep them as simple as we can, but because we have a world mission, we're going to have to build up, we're going to have to do more. But these are the days, and when people talk about working long hours for small pay and less food, or whatever it is that they talk about, just pull back a little bit and look at what it is that you've got. The opportunity to give is the thing that we should be the most thankful for of all, not the opportunity to receive. And I think that's what makes me smile the most inwardly, but not, unfortunately, appreciatively, when people talk like that of, oh, Master gave me this beautiful apartment. It's because they define the spiritual life in terms of what God's giving them. And I learned long ago that the whole way to define the spiritual life is in terms of what you are willing to keep on giving to God. And you give every ounce that you've got, and then you're the one He's going to ask more of. Okay, are you a hero or are you a coward? Because if you want to grow, then that's exactly what you should want. You should be glad that He's asking more of you than other people, because that means that you've shown a willingness to give more. The more you give, the more you'll take, until finally He's taken everything away from you. But He's given you everything in return. As St. John of the Cross said, if you want to own everything, then desire to own nothing. If you want to be everything, desire to be nothing. And this is the truth, that when you have reached that point where you say, it's all yours, God, you could take everything away this moment, and I could walk away and never look back. You could take my body, you could take everything. And when you think and feel like that, then you find, the funny thing about the path is that then all sorts of blessings come upon you, because then you are able to take it in the right kind of spirit. Again, to come back to Anandamoyi Ma, I remember a woman who came to her one time, and she was trying to sort of practically force all things on Anandamoyi Ma, giving her this, giving her that, and there were lots of little things, pens, pencils, and so on, I don't know what else, but Anandamoyi Ma just paid absolutely no attention to her at all, because she wasn't giving in the right spirit. You've seen other people who, when I remember this one woman, she was a lay disciple, and Master had been showing a great deal of favor to her and her husband and son. And I remember seeing her stand by the car one time, and just the look in her face told me a whole scripture. Just the look of presuming upon what he'd already been giving her freely. And I saw, when he saw that, he just sort of looked down and didn't say anything, and he didn't give any more after that. Because when people give in the expectation of being given to, when they receive in the expectation, of being given to, when they receive in the thought of, oh, what I'm getting, then that isn't the spirit in which it was given, if it's given in a divine way. But when somebody gives you something, it's sort of like if you give somebody a present, which he really is happy to get because it's something he needs, and he says, oh boy, look at this, and he's putting so much attention to that, and somebody else takes and he says, oh, how kind you are, it's something I've always wanted, how could you be so sensitive as to want to give this to me? And all his love goes to the giver instead of to the gift. When we can love God in that way, in the same spirit with which He gives to us, then He doesn't try to hold back. It's not as if He was trying to strip us naked and ruin us. He's only trying to strip us of ego and attachment in order that we can relate to Him in the way that He chooses to relate to us. He won't relate to us on our level. And so it is that the paradox of the spiritual path is that when you're willing to give everything, when you give everything to Him, then you find that everything that you could possibly want, He gives to you in return. And then it's not a question of, Master gave me this apartment, but just this feeling of Master's in my heart, and how wonderful it is that everything seems to go right. There's just the same words could be used, but used in a completely different spirit. Not how much He's babying me or pampering me, but how wonderful it is that He is so loving, and how wonderful it is to love Him. This is the spirit, the very essence of thanksgiving. And if we can show that spirit, particularly toward God, that I give everything to you, I want nothing in return, but everything that you do give me I take as a symbol, and nothing but a symbol of your love, then we find that thanksgiving goes on all the time, just constantly, so that you just lie down in bed at night and you're not saying thank you, you're just enjoying His presence. And every time during the day you just sort of sit and stop a few moments and feel that presence. What more is there that He could possibly give us than that? All the others are only symbols, they're just sort of spin-offs of that infinite love.